Well, hello, Googleization Nation. I am back with another live stream and really excited to be sharing today's with you, Googleization Nation community, because I've got a New York Times bestselling author, Charlene Li, right here with me. We're live. We'll be talking about one of my favorite subjects. Anybody who's been following knows was the topic of my TED Talk, was about change. And Charlene has a fantastic new book. I don't know if I can get this into view here, but you can see lots of little bookmarks. And if you looked at the inside, the pages are supposed to be white and they're mostly yellow. So I've been highlighting it and going to town with that. So you definitely got to tune in. So before we jump in, let me do some housekeeping. So we're live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, want to challenge us, just let us know. Submit some comments there. If you're not a member of Googleization Nation, I got a deal you can't refuse. You can sign up today. It's free. It'll probably always be free. You can get advanced notices and reminders about more live streams like this. Got a lot of really, really good guests lined up for the beginning of the year. Also, our Geek Skeezers and Googleization podcast. Charlene will be on that, I think, the end of January or February, forget the exact date. But you'll be back with that for a more extended interview. You get advance notice, a lot of the webinars that are coming out next year. And hopefully this will be the best part. You get a free copy of Recruiting in the Age of Googleization. It's at the printer, and hopefully January. It'll be available, but we're going into its second edition. So there's 5 new chapters and a few other updates, and really appreciate that. So to get all that stuff, all you need to do is go to join.googleizationnation. I'll have that as a banner going across here shortly, and you can sign up. And as I said, it's free, and you'll just get advance notices. Final announcement, reminder that Recruiting in the Age of Googleization Learning Hub is open too. Through the end of December, you can sign up, get 12 months access. It's only $4.99 for the year. Otherwise, it's $12.90. Or you can pay it by month, $49.50. Try to make it as affordable as possible. And we were approved as a SHRM PDC provider. And so you can go up to SHRM. And if you use the code SHRM 499, you'll save 61% off either the full year subscription or the monthly. And just go up to the website, successperformancesolutions.com, up to my site, click on the first top button, and you'll figure out how to do it. And now let's get to Charlene. I'm sure you'll recognize the name Daniel Pink. He describes Charlene as one of the brightest business minds in the business today. I highly agree with that. I've been following Charlene for 10 or 12 years. And Fast Company described her as one of the most creative people in the business. And I agree with that too. She founded Altimeter, and it was an analyst firm. It was acquired by Profit. I'm not going to go into all her bios, but she has 5 books, including the New York Times bestseller, Open Leadership. And now her most recent book is The Disruption Mindset, which is what we'll be talking about. So Charlene, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. And hey, it's great. You didn't have jury duty today. Not that we don't want you to do your civic duty, but I know we were on call. So I was holding my breath, with this. So you published this new book. As I read an excerpt, I think when it first came out, you and I have been trying to get together all the way back since, I think, August. And the book wasn't even published, I think. I think I got one of the pre-publication books. But with that, as soon as I opened it up, I know you were talking about VUCA, VUC, and I know you've talked about that in the past, but disruption. And, the buzzwords out there today are disruption, digital transformation. So let's start there, because you make a great distinction between the two of those. Having a disruption mindset, or what disruption is, and then also digital transformation. And they're not one and the same, but people seem to use them interchangeably.
Right. I mean, digital transformation is a very specific type of project that you're trying to do inside the organization. Again, taking some digital technologies and putting them deeply into the organization, and in the process, you're going to go through a transformation. Here's the thing, and a lot of the work I do around digital transformation, people are focused only on the digital part and not on the transformation part. And the transformation part is the part that is highly disruptive. And so you don't have to necessarily just be going through a digital transformation to feel very disrupted. And so I do see the things as very related, but they're also very different. They can be very much, if you're doing it correctly, they feel about pretty much the same.
Right. So you made and I don't know if I read this or I listened to, I'm an avid follower of yours and saw it somewhere, that you could have digital transformation without being disruptive, but you can't be disruptive without having digital transformation, or did I reverse that?
I think it's a little bit look at it this way. You can do a digital transformation and it just be incremental, just like a little bit of change, and nothing feels really disrupted. But I would also argue that you're either really doing digital very well already, or you're not making a big enough change. So, but if you're doing disruption, and I'll give some other examples later on, and they're in the book too as well. They weren't necessarily framed as digital transformation efforts, but they were very transformative, very disruptive, and there is usually some component of digital in it too as well. But it wasn't framed as only a digital transformation. The biggest danger of digital transformation is that people think it's about digital. It's like those techie people over there. It's their problem. It's
Right.
not my problem. And I think disruption doesn't know any boundaries within an organization. It doesn't respect departmental silos. Whereas digital transformation can oftentimes live inside of only marketing or only product design or supply chain. It goes on and on.
Yeah, and I think that's, I work a lot with HR, talent acquisition, recruitment, and then the background is actually, in fact, when I was writing my book, the original title, which is now the subtitle, which is When the Shift Hits Your Plan. And it was all about change, and it really was an evolution from the TED Talk. And in the TED Talk, I talk about that I've personally, and I know you've shared this in different words, I think you said you've always lived in disruption, and I said I have always danced with change in my entire life, doing things like that. But it's really the environment. I mean, we can't control the environment, and one of the things that your book prompted this again in my mind. One of the things that I talked about was, I opened my TED Talk by saying, there is no pause button, there's no stop button, there's no rewind button when it comes to change. And I think that's evident when it comes to disruption, because we're living in this world of exponential change, disruption. It's all happening around us. Whether we want to participate or not is our choice. But the less we participate, the more we fall behind. So I think that was, hey, I think next year we're going to transform our culture, or we're going to transform our, we're going to really look at purchasing a new technology, but people want to run it at their pace. And right. I think that's where the distinction comes in with disruption. Disruption's happening at its own pace, and how quickly we kind of adapt to that. Sorry.
Oh, and the other part of it is, I think if you have a true disruption mindset, even if things aren't feeling like they're being disrupted, you can't stand to stay still. And so you're going to be like, what happens? You're kind of paranoid, frankly. Like, what happens if what's right. working today doesn't work tomorrow? So you're constantly looking for something better. And this isn't just change for the change of sake. For the sake of change. It's really, you're changing because you feel like your customer is changing around you, and that's true. You can feel it, so you have to change with them. And there's something about leadership. I didn't put in a book, but I've been talking about it recently, which is, I think leaders, what the definition of a leader is somebody who creates change. A leader says, we're here today, we're going to go here tomorrow. And so you need somebody to help you lead that change. If you're not leading change, then you're a manager. And managers say, keep things the same. Leaders say, how do I manage better for the future and create that change?
And you, it's somewhere in the book. I think it's one of my marks here, one of my tags. You did talk about that's 4 different, was it styles of leadership that, and how each of those fits into this disruption mindset.
I call it the 4 archetypes of disruptive leadership. And there are 2 factors. So you can imagine a 2x2. One is an openness to change mindset that you have. You see change as a positive opportunity versus something to fear and to avoid. And the other one is the other axis is leadership behavior. And a very specific type of leadership behavior where you're empowering and inspiring people to create that change. So you're creating that change through other people, not just through your own efforts. And the people who are really good at this are realist optimists. So they're high on both of those, above average. But there are steadfast managers too as well. So they're really good at leading through other people, but maybe not so opportunistic about change. Right. Then there are the agent provocateurs who are all about change, but not that great at making things happen. I have a lot of those friends in Silicon Valley. They kind of wave their hands and say, disrupt or die, and then they walk off the stage.
Shiny objects, right?
Exactly. And then there's my favorite group actually is called the worried skeptics. They're not really open to change, and they're very focused on the immediate opportunities for change, for managing activities in their vicinity. And so they're usually the ones who see change coming and feel very threatened by that. So they cross their arms and say no to everything possible. And the only way to really get them on board is to help them believe in the strategy. And a disruption mindset strategy says focus on the future customer. So if you can get the worried skeptic to believe in the future customer, believe in the strategy, then you can talk about what the paths are. And worried skeptics, because, and I love that name, because they're skeptical and they see all the things that can go wrong, they can help you create those scenarios and the contingency plans that are so important to a robust strategy, because you don't know how the future is going to evolve. So you need all the different paths to be able to figure that out.
Yeah. So within that, there's like a million rabbit holes I can go down here with you. One is I don't want to leave this conversation. I want to make sure we get this in, and because you talked about the customer, so we've got the leader. And, this goes whether we're talking about emotional intelligence, where you're talking about empathy. I love the fact that you talk about empathy. I mean, the fact that we're talking about empathy in leadership and empathy in customer experience these days is just incredible, because you never heard that before. I mean, empathy was just a soft thing, and who cares about that? Because they didn't have any, what's empathy have to do with the bottom line? And now it's everywhere. So you talk about the future, focus on the future customer. And that's really hard, because I'm personally in a state with that, because I know the industry is being disrupted. My whole business model is being disrupted. And again, I love that part, but it's also scary when it's like, which customer do I focus on? So talk to us about focusing on that future customer.
Yeah, and I think especially for HR, one of the key things is oftentimes HR will say, no, my customer is an internal customer, the business manager, hiring manager. And that's true, but your ultimate customer, the people you're trying to serve, who are they? How are they changing and evolving? And the organizations that are highly disruptive have this unified view of who their customer is in the future. And so they're all aligned. And that's not only the customer facing functions like marketing, sales, and customer service, but also the internal functions like HR and finance. I mean, one of the best conversations I had was when the CFO was going on and on about the future customer, like totally embedded into what that idea was. And so when you can align on that future customer, then you can make the decisions today and the resources you need and your strategic plan of how you're going to go meet those needs of those future customers. That's why a strategy needs to be thinking 3 to 5 years out. I often go into organizations and I ask them to show me their strategic plan, and they show me their 12-month budget. That's not a plan. That says this year, this is what I'm going to spend, but it doesn't tell me, it doesn't inform me, I'm going to spend this today for this future. And the only way you can get agreement on that is to have a really good idea of who you're trying to serve in the future.
Now,
just assuming that your customers of today are the same customers of the future is a big mistake.
and you give a couple really, really good examples of that. One of them that resonated for me because I used to be a T-Mobile customer years ago and then stopped because their platform was horrible. It was really, I left them because I got a better plan somewhere else. And yet they've really, although they're still not the dominant player in the business, it was a great story. So can you share a little bit about how they switched their focus to future customer?
Yes, they were the distant number 4 player about 8 years ago, and they decided to just say, how do we do things completely differently? So they became the uncarrier. So completely focused on customers, and assuming that the customers weren't just choosing based on pricing and network coverage, but would actually switch their business. And these are high value customers from people like AT&T. Switch their business to an upstart like T-Mobile because they felt loved, they felt listened to, that they tore up the contracts and said, you are free to go if you're not happy. So I think it could have been just a tagline and a marketing value prop, but they changed everything in the organization. They trained and hired people who would put the customer first. They gave people in the front lines the power to be able to make customers happy. So they changed everything about how they operated the business.
So, and again, I mean, we consistently see companies like that. I mean, I think in the back of the book, you talk about the manifestos, and which were great. I mean, T-Mobile was one. I think Apple was another. I mean, is there another example of a transformation that you've seen that they got it, they understood what the disruption mindset was?
I think there's so many examples in the book, but I think with manifestos, I gave 2 other examples from Nextdoor and Red, but I keep coming across them. I was walking through the IBM office and they had a manifesto on the wall. And this is for IBM iX Interactive. I just recently wrote a manifesto for my own business. Like, okay, I should practice my own advice here. Like, okay, sit down and write that manifesto. Sure. Terrifying and absolutely thrilling to do that too as well. Because it's more than just a mission statement or a vision statement. It says for your organization, even for your team, what do you believe? What do you stand for? Why do you show up at work every day? What is the change you want to create because the world looks like this? And I think a manifesto is just so much deeper and a statement of why you are doing what you're doing. So,
I mean, that's a good stepping off point because I want to make this practical for everyone who's listening today and in the future. I work with a lot of small, medium-sized companies, and so when we hear the stories about IBM and T-Mobile and Apple and Nextdoor, it sometimes almost becomes irrelevant. It's like, oh, we're small, and I've said this often: being small, being in a particular industry, being in rural America versus urban, being in the Midwest versus East or West Coast doesn't matter. We're all affected by this. So where's the first place you would recommend someone starts to say, we get it. We need to change our direction. We do need that disruptive 3-year plan. We need to transform our culture. Where do we start?
I think the first thing, again, is to look at that future customer. We talked about that. Think about how you want to lead differently. How do you show up differently every day as a leader, talking about disruption? And I do mean that every single day. You have to say this. You have to talk about it constantly. You can't just assume that you said it once that people are going to forget. This is really hard work. And so you got to remind people that we're on this journey, we're on this disruption path, and really reinforce that you're trying to create this movement of people to take on the mantle of leadership. But then I would say culture is really important. And culture is basically made up of beliefs and behaviors. And I talk to so many people, especially CEOs of small and medium-sized businesses and large organizations, that kind of throw up their hands and say, I can't change my culture. It is what it is. And I'm looking at them, I'm going, wait a minute, you're the leader of your organization. Of course you can change your culture. The problem is they don't know what to change it to. And so you can't go from here to there unless you have an idea of what you're trying to change it to. If culture eats strategy for breakfast every day, you know what your strategy is now, which is to go after future customers. Now make sure your culture is aligned around those future customers? What are the beliefs, the things that you say to yourself that will focus you on future customers? What are the behaviors that will help you remind yourself of them? And I think there are different ways to be able to do that. But I found that 3 beliefs drive disruptive organizations consistently. Their openness of data, transparency, they create accountability. Decision-making processes are open. There's agency, that employees have the ability and the power to go and make decisions, act like owners, and to own their decisions. And the third is a bias for action. So openness, agency, and a bias for action are the 3 beliefs that disruptive organizations have in spades and build into their culture.
And it just interesting. This morning, a good friend of mine, a colleague, we work with her a lot. Her name's Diane Hamilton, Dr. Diane Hamilton. She also just recently did a book. It's called Breaking the Curiosity Code. So she talked. One of her focuses is on curiosity and perception, which fits right into your world. And she's identified. One is I suggested the 2 of you get together. She's got a great podcast, and I think you need to be on it, and vice versa. You 2 need to connect. So I'll do that for you. But with that, she talks about the 4 fears. She talks about fears that get in people's way. We won't go into that. That'll distract from here. So you can go up and look about the curiosity code. But being focused on curiosity is that open-mindedness. And there's some people that have a curious mind, but they're held back by fear of technology or fear of being wrong or fear of making a mistake. So that needs to be transformed in the culture. You need to take away those fears and an openness. And some people just need to be more creative, more open-minded. What questions do I need to ask? How can I do that? So it's a combination of environment and sometimes innate ability. So I talk a lot about being open-minded and
right.
Not just creative, but open-minded.
Yeah, and I think, again, that open-minded creativeness, that focus to overcome the anxieties that are naturally there, the fears, I call it the judge, standing over there, and it feels like it's judging you constantly. And again, the thing that I have found that helps people overcome this, if they don't have it inside of them, is that focus on the future customer. Because I won't do it for me, I will do it for them. And because I so believe in the need that they have and the belief that we can do this, we can actually meet that need. We are the ones to do that, that I will be driven and that will overcome my fear. And I become very curious about who they are. What are they doing? You're creating these empathy maps to understand them better. What do they say, think, feel, and do? And I think I find that empathy maps open up the mind to be much more curious about those customers and starts changing the culture. So I think it all ties together in terms of that strategy and the culture coming together. The 2 cannot live separately from each other.
And because my world is about helping companies attract and retain the right talent, which ultimately becomes the culture. And a lot of the people that are listening are also in that space. So when you're talking about the future customer, it's not just an external customer, it's also who's our future employee. And, so often people get focused on, well, these are the skills we need, and the skills need to be attached to a body. But who are the people that will be passionate about that future external customer or our mission? So that's one tie-in. Go ahead. It looked like you had
I was just thinking that you can always train somebody on skills. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to train people on curiosity.
Yeah, it's a saying. When I entered this business over 25 years ago, and I always believed it before, I just didn't necessarily put it into that tagline. But we still 25 years later, we still hire for skills and fire on attitude. So why don't we hire on attitude, hire on the fit, hire on the cultural fit, beyond just cultural fit, but people have an open mindedness. They're empathetic. They have the desire to learn. They have a purpose in life, and you're helping them fulfill that. We hire people with that, and then they will be motivated to learn the skills. It sounds simple, but it's not. Which leads to also you make an emphasis that disruption is hard. It takes we can throw out the buzzwords: resilience, perseverance, grit, all that stuff, but it's really hard to leave the status quo?
Yeah, I wanted to have an honest conversation about disruption. And I think in so many cases, you pick up a business book and you expect this is going to give me the answer. It's going to give me the easy button. I do this and life will be great. And I'm just saying just the opposite. The reason why you take this on is because you believe you can really help and make a difference, have an impact, and have that exponential impact and growth. And if you're going to do that, I can guarantee you it is hard. It is going to be difficult. It is going to be stomach churning, and your palms are going to be all sweaty because growth is hard. And the reason why most companies don't grow, even though they have a complete and total capability of doing this, is they don't want the discomfort. They don't expect it. And so I think I wanted to have a better dialogue and an honest dialogue about what it takes to grow, to be able to create these opportunities.
And you're pretty candid about this, that with companies that don't disrupt or don't have that disruptive mindset, will really struggle growing and maybe just disappear. And
I look at it this way. Again, we all know what people are willing to do for something that they really care about. And if you are sitting there in your comfort zone, you are at risk of letting, first of all, your customers go further and further away from you, but also somebody coming in from within your industry, maybe even outside your industry, coming in and saying, I am passionate about chasing after those customers, and you will be left behind. So I think one of the biggest dangers is to say, well, I don't want to be the innovator in the field. I want to be the fast followers. I'm going to let everyone else innovate, and then I'll follow them when it's safe.
And I think that it's really important. We've been talking about leadership, organization, and people talk about, again, we're too big. But I would encourage individuals, because I'm concerned where individuals are going. That I still hear this, that, well, I won't be around to see that, or it's only, I've only got 5 years or 10 years left in my career, or I think I'm going to retire early, and you have all these things. So even there's a tremendous amount in this book to understand who you are, what's available, how can you personally, what's my personal manifesto, where do I want to be when I grow up? What's my purpose? So I think from an individual point, the disruption mindset is very, very powerful.
Yeah, I have this mantra. I live by it. I have a little saying I have a little plaque on my desk over here, and I also drink it out of my coffee mug that says, "Life begins at the end of your comfort zone." And that's a reminder to me every single day that I only grow and I only learn as a person, as a human, when I step out of that comfort zone, when I'm willing to put myself on the line, be curious, not be right, be vulnerable. And the best leaders, the best people who are growing in their humanity, frankly, are the ones who push that on multiple dimensions, not just at work, but also on their personal front and with relationships. And the reason why disruption is so hard isn't because of the technology or all these other factors. It's because the power relationship changes in the relationships around the people with you. When disruption comes in, it says the things that you knew where you fit into the world get torn up and thrown up in the air. And you have to pick up those pieces and re-put them together again. And that's hard work. But also the potential to create new bonds, new relationships, and to strengthen the ones that are already strong are tremendous. And I think that's frankly worth fighting for. I'm not saying blow up everything in your life, but I would say find the places where you can push that edge, go 110%, go beyond your comfort zone, push a little bit beyond that, and see what happens.
And you make a really good point of that in the book. And again, it's not to tell, if you have to be really disruptive, if you have to be like T-Mobile, they probably would have been out of business, without being as disruptive as they were. But you make a real point, is that on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe you only need to be a 3, or maybe you have to be a 9. And
it is very contextual, very contextual.
Yeah,
because you can be a 3 on personally, but if your organization is a 2, you are rocking the boat like there is no tomorrow. But you could be an 8, but if your organization is a 9 or a 10, then you're the laggard. So there's a bit of a fit here, being appropriate for the level of disruption that you want to create. But to know where you are on that quotient, on that scale, is a really important thing. And to know where your organization is and how much you need to be disrupting yourself to chase after those customers. Those are all really good, intentional discussions to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I want to be sensitive of your time and everybody who's listening as well, because I can talk to you all day, and hopefully it would be likewise. What's a kind of a final words of advice? Let's go back to what's the takeaway. What's the thing you want people to do today to be able to start doing differently?
I would say that again, my sort of key point here is that it's not some technology or disruption innovation that's going to drive growth. It's growth itself that's disruptive. So think about the ways that you could think about the growth opportunities and find one idea, one hypothesis that you would love to test, and see if that's an actual place where you can go to figure out who your future customer is. I bet you already know who your future customer is, but you're just not sure. And the key step you want to take is, what is the one data point that will help you feel more comfortable just to get that to that point of what I call minimally viable data. Not full perfect data, but minimally viable data to be able to take that first step and make a commitment to that future customer.
What a great encapsulation, because everybody I talk to wants to grow, whether it's individually, other than a couple of my peers who say, oh, we're retired and we're so happy we're out of this rat race, which is interesting because we also talk about, well, this is a young person's game. Well, to the 20-year-old, I'm not sure either you or I are considered very young.
Yeah. What's interesting is when I did my survey data, surveyed 1,000 leaders and asked them about their disruption levels, it did not vary by age. Mm-hmm. So it was really interesting. Those archetypes, there was no age difference between them.
Yeah.
And so that makes sense.
People on both ends. Yeah. I mean, some of my, I have peers and I have people that are 10 and 20 years older than I am. And I'm one of the older baby boomers. So they're old. And yet they're like me. I mean, we got that entrepreneurial mindset, millennial mindset, whatever you want to call it. We're living like we're 40 years. We're just starting all these new businesses in our head sometimes, but and yet there's some younger people that struggle with it, and so not surprising.
Yeah, it is not age dependent. I mean, there was no variation on age, and so it was just fascinating to see that different age groups had the same level of disruption as older age groups. And I tested all these different ways. The only real difference was in gender. Women in the United States consistently saw themselves as less disruptive than their male counterparts across all different dimensions. And so that's something to think about from an HR perspective, that if you want people to step into their full capabilities of being a disruptive leader, there's a segment of people, in particular women, who are not as comfortable, even though they're just as capable as their male counterparts. So keep that in mind and give them that extra scaffolding to encourage them to take that leap.
And what I was also going to say is that whether you're an individual or whether you're a company, whether you're a lead, management, you want to grow. But in order to grow, I think this was the most powerful thing you said. In order to grow, you have to be growth is a disruption, which means you need a disruptive mindset. You can't grow and hold on to the status quo. You can't you can't run the first base and keep your foot, or can't steal second and keep your foot on first. This is one of the metaphors that I used to use. You got to run. You got to leave home base eventually.
Yeah.
So, I've got your banner running across the bottom, so you can go to charleneli.com. You can go to Amazon and get the disruption mindset. What else? Where else can they get a hold of you? What would you recommend to learn more about this?
You can reach me on any social media, pretty much using Charlene Li, my name. And I am also creating a community called Quantum Networks. So quantum-networks, plural, with .com. And the idea is to connect these disruptors, because it's a pretty hard, lonely journey. And what I heard from disruptors over and over again is that they wanted to be able to connect with each other. So if you're trying to create exponential change, would love you to go check out Quantum Networks and see some of the resources in the community that's there.
Be sure to do that. I know I don't know when, it wasn't yesterday, but a couple weeks ago I signed up for that. So great to be part of that. And welcome to Googleization Nation.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks very much for being part of that. I'm really honored and humbled. You took out some time and being part of this. Big fan. Pick up. Where's the book? pick this up. These bags. But I'll send you a picture of this, Charlene. And I really appreciate it. Invaluable information. Best of luck, and I'm sure we'll continue to see each other on the path.
Thank you so much for having me, Ira.
My pleasure.